A little while ago, I saw this video of what looked like a typical street fight over something very stupid. You see in the middle of a street, looked like it was at night, someplace where there's a bunch of people, and then two guys square off, raise their fists, and get into what looks like some sort of dueling fight. With that, I mean, it doesn't look like criminal violence. It's not like somebody is getting robbed. It's just two guys, for whatever reason, going at it. This is the kind of violence that in many cases is avoidable, so that's why I tend to call it stupid. The issue is this: with violence, you never know where it ends. You can very often understand why it starts, but you never know upfront where it will end, how far it will go, and how small details can make a huge difference. The title of the video that I gave to it was "And This Is Why You Wear a Belt." The two guys square off, they're just outside striking distance, and suddenly the one guy grabs his pants and pulls them up because they're sagging. It's not a good idea to have your pants wrapped around your ankles when you're fighting. So he figured, like, the fight's not really on just yet. I'm just gonna pull up my pants and then I'm good to go. I'm guessing that is what he was thinking, because that was what he did. And when he did that, the other guy just lunged forward, clocked him in the head with a big punch, and knocked the guy out. And the fight was over before it even started. This is one of those really silly things that don't really have a huge impact until it actually happens to you. And that's where I find that it's often just hard to explain to people who have very little experience with violence that this kind of stuff routinely happens. And you may not think it's important until it is what trips you up. For instance, this is one of the reasons why you never see me go out of the house on flip-flops, which is what so many people do nowadays. Because as far as footwear goes, it's very unreliable. You tend to your foot tends to move around on the surface of the flip-flop, which means it's unstable to begin with, especially if the weather is hot and you're a little bit sweaty and so on, or if for whatever reason you walk into something like a puddle or what have you, it's going to be slippery as hell. The first thing that is something you have to keep in mind when it comes to a physical altercation is that if you lose your balance from the get-go, things are not looking up for you. Quite on the contrary. So footwear and the surface you stand on is something that you should take into account. So, like I said, you won't see me going outside of the house wearing flip-flops. And when I do leave the house, before I go out, put on my shoes, and then I make sure they are tied correctly, so I don't trip over the shoelaces, but also that the feet are, that they're gonna stay on my feet. Why? You can ask a bunch of people who've been in fights wearing, for instance, sneakers or something along those lines. It very often happens that your shoe just comes off. All of a sudden, you're walking around on your sock or on an empty foot. A barefoot. Sorry, that's what I was looking for. If you think that doesn't affect you, here's a challenge for you. Next time you train, put on one of your shoes, one of your sneaker shoes, and the other one just wear a sock, and see what the difference that makes when it comes to performing your techniques correctly. Now, yes, obviously you will be able to adjust. It's not an issue. The point is that it's going to happen when you least expect it. You're going to start with two shoes on your feet, and all of a sudden you're only wearing one. You've got one foot that's not really helping you stay in balance, and it's slippery, and it's moving all around the place, and the other one's stable, or stable as you can make it. So this is a typical example of how clothing can get in the way, and that's kind of the point here. When you watch soldiers go into battle, law enforcement officers having to do something that is highly dangerous, then typically what the professionals tend to do is they make sure that they check all their gear, that everything is in place where it should be, and so on, that the shoelaces are tied correctly, that they are basically good to go. Why? Because their lives depend on it. If in the middle of some sort of operation, a soldier is tripping over his own shoelaces, well, yeah, that's not going to be real helpful, is it? If you haven't really secured your weapon correctly and things go wrong, as they tend to do, and you slip and fall and the weapon comes loose, that's not a good thing either. So, why is it that so many people tend to think that, well, that's not really important? I'm going to walk around with flip flops and my pants are sagging over my butt. Uh, for some reason, they think that, well, it's fine. Now, as I've explained in the previous episodes, I'm getting older. I'm heading deeply into the get off my lawn territory of the adult male's life. And that means that I shake my head at many things nowadays. Usually, just because I see the humor in it, but mostly if when it comes to self defense and violence, my thought process is that that just doesn't make any sense to me. Now, it doesn't mean you have to go outside always thinking that the apocalypse is going to happen and you're going to have to fight 50,000 people. That's not what I mean. What I mean is that if you do end up going out, for instance, like the guy in the video, you're on this busy street, there's truckloads of people. So it kind of looked like to me like a typical like Friday or Saturday night when a bunch of young folks are going out. There's a lot of heavy drinking, and then typically a lot of problems start to happen as well. If you're going there, even if you have zero intention of participating in that, that doesn't mean that violence won't be able to find you. So why would you at least not just wear a belt so your pants don't fall off? That's the absolute minimum. I've talked to a bunch of people who one of the things that they were surprised about after they were in some sort of street fight or violent altercation is how messed up their clothes were. Like I just mentioned, shoes just all the way off, or their shirt, pants totally ripped to shreds, and so on. And they have no recollection of when exactly it happened. And they're like, okay, I have to go home now because I can't, keep walking around like this wearing this messed up clothes. The typical thing is also that if you see the archetype of two young guys, the one bumps into the other and it escalates into an altercation. Just the archetype of young males acting out violence. What you see then is this, taking off the shirt and showing the naked upper body. I've seen actual confrontations in which that happened, and as the guy is pulling his shirt over his head, the other guy strikes. Of course, if you want fairness and competition rules, then you should go do combat sports. But don't expect that kind of stuff to be there for you when it's actual real life violence that is coming right at you. So that makes zero sense to me. Just take your shirt off. It's like, to begin with, if your shirt is that important to you that you don't want it to get ripped or dirty while you fight, putting yourself at risk to get knocked out while you're taking it off, then I think you have your priorities in the wrong place, to put it mildly. So, my suggestion would be it's a good thing to have these kind of self defense and safety habits anyway, and we all have them to a certain degree. Where you, for instance, before you go to bed, you just make sure that all the doors and windows are closed and locked where possible. So that is just very basic, just habit basically of making sure that you can sleep safe and sound at night. When you go out into the street, you leave the house, you make sure that you are alert and just paying attention to what's going on around you, as opposed to walking around typing on your phone and being oblivious to your environment. We all recognize that these are good safety habits. How about just a small check before you leave the house of your clothing? Like I said, make sure that you've got the right shoes on, that they are tied correctly. If you enjoy wearing these baggy pants, it's fine. Maybe wear a belt. If you're wearing your t-shirt over it, nobody sees that belt. It's gonna be fine. But at the very least, your pants won't drop over your ankles. I remember the first time when I was in the US and I saw these youngsters wearing their pants just halfway down their asses. I was like, it would be so easy to just physically end any confrontation with them by simply making sure they trip and fall, which is going to happen when you've got your pants like that very easily. It's very easy to immediately put somebody down by, basically yanking their pants down and shoving them because you can't really step all that well. You've got your pants down your ankles or down your knees, so it's not a huge stretch to see that somebody with bad intentions would use that against you if that is how you walk around. Now, again, I may be old, but I have no problem with people making those kind of fashion statements. It's not for me, but if that makes you feel happy, by all means, go right ahead. But then don't think that that won't be used against you. If your sense of fashion is that important to you, again, no issues with that, but that comes at a cost when it comes to safety. It might seem a little bit silly talking about this kind of stuff, but again, it's always the small things that that we all tend to discount that all of a sudden can trip us up and end us in a world of trouble, like with this guy who gets knocked out simply because he didn't wear a belt. So I'm going to leave you guys with these thoughts and maybe check your wardrobe a little bit before you go out. There's a whole discussion that you can have about this. And a lot of people have it when it comes to EDC, everyday carry, and they have all these talks about, I carry this knife and that tool and that blackjack or sap and this and that, and that's where I put my wallet. And if they've got a concealed firearms license, they talk about how they wear their holster and where and how and da 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 da. But I hardly see anybody talking about, okay, what kind of pants are you wearing? Are you wearing a good belt that's actually going to help you keep all that stuff in place? Or is it a crappy belt that you didn't pay attention to and didn't give a second thought? What kind of shoes are you wearing? Is it, a more formal dress where you have to wear your nice shoes, but they're more slippery? Okay, well, then take that into account. First thing I do when I have to buy new, I call them fancy shoes for wearing under a suit and tie, wearing to a suit and tie event, is scuff up the soles by walking outside on the sidewalk so that they're a little bit less slippery. First thing I do. Why? Because I don't enjoy falling on my face, even if I just lose balance for a reason totally unrelated to violence and self-defense. But if it does happen that you have to be defending yourself wearing those kind of shoes and in that kind of outfit, you need to be able to move. It doesn't have to be spectacular, but you need to be able to move. It's not a huge deal if you prefer to, be more on the side of aesthetics when it comes to your clothing than safety. It's not the worst thing in the world. But for instance, if you live in an environment where violence is quite common, then it might be a good idea to invest a little bit of time into making sure that you don't end up like that poor guy with your pants. You feel them just as the fight starts. You feel them sliding down. You're like, oh, I'm going to be in my briefs here. Everybody's going to see it. You won't be able to fight. Let me just quickly pull these up, and that's how you get knocked out. You don't want to be the next guy on YouTube or on social media who is featured in that kind of video. But that's it, folks. We are hitting the 15-minute mark, so I'm going to call it an end. Again, as always, like, subscribe, share this video with everybody else. That helps out the channel a lot. If you're watching this on YouTube, it'd be great if you would subscribe. I've recently started a new YouTube channel away from my old account. And this one is only going to feature the podcast episodes. And mainly when I do an interview, um, you will see that I try to always make a video recording of the Zoom call that I make with my guests, and you will be able to see the guest talking there as well. So that's the reason why I started doing that. Right, so what's up next week? Normally next week I have the next video, the next podcast is going to be me talking about, and then the week after is going to be Kelly Sayre, who is from Diamond Arrow Group, who is, she was very kind to talk to me for a long time about what situational awareness is. And I wanted to mention this because it kind of ties into what I just talked about now. Just instead of being aware of your surroundings, be aware of yourself and what kind of stuff you're wearing. All right, that's it. Gonna sign off right here. Everybody have a great day. Bye-bye.